Hello, this is the weekly water outlook for the Southeast U.S. I'm John Feldt. Well, these are some of the key trends across the entire nation currently, and I wanted to sort of point out, like I have very frequently, that really the Southeast U.S. is pretty much the only anomaly of excess soil moisture, excess precipitation in the entire nation. Elsewhere, we're looking at anomalies that are below normal, if not very much below normal. So if we look at precipitation over the Southeast U.S., these are some rainfall amounts from July. Both Birmingham and Atlanta had over 8 inches of rain, which was about 3 to 4 inches above normal. Look at Tallahassee, 14.96 inches of rain, a whopping 8 inches above normal. So all across the Southeast U.S. over July, we've had rainfall above normal. Now, sometimes I put weekly, sometimes I put monthly. I wanted to put a soil moisture anomaly that goes more seasonally this time. This goes from May, so this is sort of a summertime big picture. And it again shows in green here, the excess soil moisture over the Southeast U.S. And I think this is a good one, if better than most, to show that vulnerability should a tropical system move inland, that soils remain quite wet, both from a short-term perspective and a long-term perspective. So you can see that this is the story not just in the short term, but as you all know, it goes from the start of summer. Now, even though we're not talking about drought, we've certainly had drought in the Southeast for many years in the recent past. I did a little mini study here. I put this in my newsletter this month on does drought really expand or not over the summer, and I suspected that drought always expanded to some degree. And what I found in the top image is that there's a lot of variability. Matter of fact, most of the time there is very little change in the coverage of drought over the summer, and increases and decreases are fairly similar as well, although still there's a sizable number of years that do increase. Now the bottom graph here does show the more severe drought, and there's even less confidence that it will expand. Matter of fact, if you look at the blue bar graph, those are years that it's contracted. So really, if you look at the percentage that has decreased and very little change, more years have either decreased or not changed than increased for severe drought. So little tidbit there that don't always assume that if you start the summer in drought that it's going to continue. Okay, so let's look at August precipitation over the area. July is on the left, August is on the right, and generally speaking, there's less precipitation in August than in July. August can be sort of a quiet month, especially if we don't get tropical activity, and I'm always saying tropical activity doesn't just mean tropical cyclones or hurricanes, any type of plume of tropical moisture. But you do see that shading in red right along the coast and near coast, and that is that interaction with sea breeze type activity, afternoon thunderstorms, and it also does indicate that there is the possibility of some tropical activity. You can also see the enhanced precipitation due to diurnal heating over the higher elevation of the southern Appalachians. Now the pattern we're in has really been a persistent pattern. 3 or 4 weeks now, and it looks like the next several weeks at least, we're going to have an area of high pressure over the west, low pressure over the east. Now what this means for the Southeast U.S. is really the amount of precipitation that we get here is dependent on how much energy just dips down into our area. Now sometimes this jet will be slightly further north, we won't get as much energy, sometimes slightly further south. In any case, this energy is most likely to move across the northern part of Georgia into the Carolinas, less energy over the southern area here, and I'll mention the rainfall outlook that's based on that. So keep that in mind, that really the degree of precipitation is going to depend on very subtle changes on this jet stream, either north or south. And that's been what we've seen over the last couple weeks, and I think that's what we're going to see in the next couple weeks as well. Now you might have noticed a blog that I sent out this past week about the tropics. First of all, on the left here, tropics are very quiet. There is a frontal boundary off the coast, some disturbed weather, but right now no expected development. But I did mention that this area dust that has blown off the African continent into the tropical Atlantic is suppressing tropical activity. Matter of fact, if you look here in the Atlantic, in the main development region, look how quiet it is here. There's just really not much going on at all. It's very, very quiet, and that is due to, in large part, all this dust that is blowing out there. So at least in the near term, it looks pretty quiet in that region. Well, this is how much rain fell over the southeast U.S. Over the last 7 days. I think what strikes me are a couple things. First of all, we still have significant rain over parts of the area, but I think more importantly is it's much more scattered. This is much more a typical summertime pattern. We have many areas that have received less rain, and that areas in blue are only maybe a 1/10 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. And the areas of more heavy rain, the yellows and reds, are much more scattered. So even though there was still rain and somewhat adequate coverage over the southeast U.S., it was much more typical of summertime, not so much excessive. So then when we look at the percent of normal rainfall, you see the splotchiness, blues and reds. That's your summertime pattern. What we've seen in past weeks have been a lot of blues and purples, much more widespread. So it's really tamed down as far as precipitation goes over the last week. And I think that's going to generally be the trend. There'll be some exceptions from time to time and for some areas, but that's generally going to be the trend, getting back more into this scattered type pattern. Still rainfall, but not as excessive and not as widespread. Okay, now let's look at stream flow, a 7-day average stream flow here. And what we see here is the highest flows, and that's the black dots, are in the higher elevations of the Appalachians where precipitation has been enhanced. Flows have come back down, settled down a bit into the normal range over central and eastern parts of the Carolinas and parts of Georgia. But generally the trend is for higher stream flows across the southeast U.S. Now the jet stream pattern, this is the pattern that's forecast this week, and you might say that looks very similar to what I said is currently in effect, and it's not going to change a whole lot. So I'm not going to say a whole lot more about this. I think I've explained it a little bit already, but this is the current jet stream pattern, and that's what's forecast this week. Now, when you look at where precipitation will form, I wanted to point out that we have to look at temperature a bit here. These are past 3 or 4 day temperature anomalies. Blue are cool temperatures, and browns are warmer temperatures. And generally speaking, the rainfall will be most enhanced right along the gradient from the cool air to the warm air. So that's going to be right in this area, right in here. And then, depending on where that jet stream is, perhaps come up into here. So that is why we're getting some precipitation. Now, we're not going to get that much energy. There's just not that much embedded energy. So it looks like from week to week, the precipitation will be a bit variable. It's not going to be all areas are going to be getting precipitation. And that's why you see here over the next 7 days, heaviest precipitations to the north. More likely to get more energy, more likely to be in that temperature gradient. And over the southeast U.S., more moderate amounts of rain than we've seen in some past weeks. And matter of fact, the eastern parts of the Carolinas are beginning to dry out again. This will be the second week with precipitation not quite as much as we saw earlier this season. So much more, I guess I would call it a typical type pattern. And I do see this pattern somewhat settling down where we're not going to get as much excess precipitation each and every week, but still that wet pattern does look like it will persist. And I want to show that here the next 3 or 4 weeks. This is the second week, August 12th to 20th, and look at the pattern here. Now, don't get too hung up right now on the exact amounts, the blues and the purples being heavier amounts, or the location. But I do want to say that this is very similar to the pattern that we're currently in, where we have that boundary and that upper jet right along the southern edge. Week 2 looks very similar. Matter of fact, if we go here and we look at a little bit further out, if we go to week 3 and week 4, look at this. Pretty amazing, isn't it? We have week 3 still enhanced southeast U.S. precipitation. Week 4 enhanced southeast precipitation. Right now, I don't think either one of those are tropical in nature. There's no sign to me looking at it. I think that's just the continuing trend that we've had. So, having said that, looks like the wet spell will continue. We're along the southern edge of that jet. I don't think it's going to be as widespread that we've seen. It might flip-flop next week back, but right now this week looks like there will be some precipitation, but not quite as widespread, more chancy type precipitation. Tropical activity looks very quiet at the current time, and this is a persistent pattern that very well could last through most of August. So what's up this week? Well, my newsletter's coming out probably today. Long-range outlook will be on Thursday. I'll look into August and September and October, and sector updates throughout the week as needed. Nice talking to y'all, and I will be updating the briefing again next week.